Alright, I'm going to show you how to make or not make, but to trim an inset lid. I already have a video on how to make an inset lid. So I'm going to show you a piece. See if I can back away enough. With an inset lid, little handle on top. So I'm going to show you how to trim the inset lid. So the inset lid itself is thrown upside down, thrown this way. Then you take it off the wheel, you flip it over, and I'm going to show you how to trim up here. So that way, in the end, you have a nice little bulbed piece. This one's a ferric chloride or a foil sagger with just a smoked lid and like a basic crackle clear that I learned from Don Ellis and Randy Broadnex. I believe it's 80-20. So, yeah, show you how to trim that lid. So it's already locked into my little Giffen grip. You could use 3 balls of clay if you don't have a Giffen grip. So first thing, I want to trim some of the weight off just like any other pot. It's almost like trimming a plate. So I want to trim it nice and clean, and I keep about a 45-degree angle. And this other hand here, it's just kind of a counterbalance. It's just an old habit. I think it's a good habit, but it's not a necessary habit. I don't want to trim too far down in case my edge when I threw it. If my edge was thin down here, sometimes it'll kind of dissolve, or it'll last through the bisque firing, and then I'll go to do, especially if it's going through a lot of thermal shock on a alternative firing where I'm pulling it out at 1600, 1800 degrees, they'll have a tendency to crack or chip. A lot of cracks if it's too thin. So I'm going to leave this part down here kind of thick. Sometimes I'll even trim upwards if I squeeze, like when I was throwing it, if I squeeze the lip too thin, I'll trim inward like this, just to make it a little more blocky or a little more thick. The thinner the piece, the more likely it is to break, but then again, aesthetically it's more pleasing, and it's also lighter weight. In this case, it's not the most functional piece. These little moon jars or orbs or bulbs, I've heard them called so many different things, just depends on where you're at and who you're talking to. I know a few of my favorite potters in the area. I won't name them, but they're on the west coast here, and they call it a moon jar or a moon pot. Right now I'm just going to get rid of some of that thickness. That's all I'm doing right now. Not going for style points. The only consideration I really have other than that edge is up here. I want to make sure I leave myself enough of a platform or a stage or a handle. The other thing is, and then getting into the aesthetics here, is I want to trim down a little bit here just to present that stage. Sometimes, like recently I made a crackle white piece. A moon jar with a lid, and I trimmed it completely round because it fit so flush and nice to my piece. In this case, I am going to go up a little bit just to make it all look the same, because this might not have a glaze on it. Like I often just smoke these, just fire them to 1800 and whatever I'm doing, raku or whatever alternative I'm doing. Kosi sometimes, but I'll pull them out and I'll just stick them in sawdust or newspaper. Newspaper and sawdust is really prevalent here at my school because we have a school newspaper, or at least we did, and then we have a yearbook, and I get all kinds of paper from those, left residual paper, and also we have a wood shop right next door, so that's really nice. It's good that we still have some vocational programs. Trades or industrial arts. Okay, so now I'm going to leave that stage. I'm going to flick it just to make sure I have enough clay and not going to go through it. Still have plenty of clay. So I'm going to pronounce that stage right here by really going in on this spot. I could leave it like that if I wanted to, and it allows for a lot of color coordination. So like say the body was crackle white, I could leave this black and do this line crackle white, and then the top part would be black. I could do a crackle white handle, any number of things to work on uniformity, contrast, whatever. In this case, I'm gonna trim that down a little round, all the way down. I move those pieces because I've run into a few casualties trimming. If I let it stick on there, sometimes when I'm trimming, it'll just push it in into the clay if the clay is still wet enough, which this is pretty wet. It's definitely towards the leather hard side, otherwise I'd be caving my sides in. The main thing I'm thinking about right now when it comes to trimming this part is I don't want a really big shoulder. I want it to be somewhat flush and flowing with my piece, almost as if you're trimming the bottom of a bowl or a bulb, moon pot, whatever you want to call it. But you want it to be sort of flowing. You don't want it to go down and then have this big shoulder. So this is where I break out my rivet tool and start going ham with this thing. I'm really gonna dig in there. This is also where that other hand comes in handy. It hits my hand and I can bump it off of there. Okay, I'm gonna make this slightly rounded. So there's a lot of aesthetic you can provide right here in something like this. I could take a pencil to it, make a line. As long as your lid's thrown fairly precise, there's a lot you can do. This part was kind of an afterthought. That lid will burn out. I've heard graphite doesn't burn out because they use graphite pencils in kilns and things for markers, but maybe there's not the same concentration in the pencils we have at our school because they burn out. About the only thing it doesn't burn off is my kiln shelf that goes into my flue or my chimney of my kiln, because I mark that with a pencil and it stays at least for a year or two, and it fades. All right, there we have it. So at this point I would, and this is literally a piece of scrap from trimming the pot, like the skirt of a pot, so it's not an actual handle. I'm not going to use this, but just for the sake of example, I could score and slip this on. Obviously this one doesn't fit very well on this piece, but I'd make a handle that fits this lid. Sometimes I even fire the handle separate. I may glaze it and say a crackle clear, a raku glaze, anything that's going to melt to some degree, and I'll leave this part bare, but I'll set it on there and glaze it on there. That helps a lot. I've done it with foil sagger as well, where I'll do the body foil of the jar, the bulb. I'll do foil sagger, then the lid will be black, and I'll foil sagger the handle, and I'll put a little bit of crackle clear underneath and I'll melt it on there. So you can even use epoxy for the sake of creativity. If it's something that doesn't have a melting point, like a foil sagger piece, there's nothing in it that melts, so you'd have to have some sort of glaze or silica or something that melts and welds it to the lid. So that's an inset lid. I'll take it off just so you can see the inside. Again, it's in the other video, you'll see the inset lid, but it's thrown upside down like so. And then I would just check the fit in my bowl. Sometimes